welcome to That Chat. We are so excited to be here tonight with you on this gloriously sunny Sunday evening. We have to thank our sponsor first for bringing us to you every week, My Girl Managed Services. If you have a new or existing business and you need help with your social media, Google presence, or even your website, make sure to check out My Girl Managed Services. Jen Narkovich and her team have a lot of experience and they can get you the audience that you need to have to make your business successful. Let me introduce our host tonight, Sarah Smith Katz.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here with all of you this evening. And we have a special guest host with me. Normally we have Kanchan Gupta with us that talks about, our health chat. But tonight her daughter, Kanchan Gupta, is joining us and she is going to basically do all of the talking for us, but I'm going to interject here and there. But this is a great learning experience for her. And, we hope that you will jump on and ask questions if you have any. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Kanchan Gupta. Hi, Kanchan.
Hi. So today the guest I invited to speak with us is Ngozi Bell, and she is a person of many trades. She has experience in physics and electrical engineering, executive leadership, venture capital, entrepreneurship, and business development. She's involved in many sectors, but locally in the Lehigh Valley area, she started celebrating Women's History Month in March to honor and celebrate women.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. I've heard so many good things, so I'm ready.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on a Sunday night when it's been such a warm day. At least here in the Poconos, it's definitely been warm. But we appreciate you coming on and joining us. And we're looking forward to this conversation as well. Kanchan, take it away.
So the topic that we decided on was inclusion, and specifically how inclusion is a requirement for true participation. So would you like to explain what that means a little bit?
Oh, absolutely, Kanchan. So first, thank you so much, Kanchan, for asking me to come on. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, so inclusion as a requirement for true participation just means that, a lot of times we've looked at inclusion almost like something we have to do, sort of a part-time activity or to meet some kind of demographic or something like that. Almost like inclusion becomes exclusion, right? You bring somebody in so that you can meet some kind of a code or some kind of a requirement. And what I'm arguing is that it should actually be the opposite, that inclusion is really about the largesse of allowing multiple people, multiple ideas, multiple experiences come to bear on important things. Because we know that the more people participate or the more things or the more solutions are brought to a problem, what does that do? It gives us options to make the best of decisions. So it's sort of changing that process around a little bit and looking at it as inclusion as a big thing. So, tying that to participation, that, they say 2 heads are better than one. If 2 heads are better than one, what are 5 heads? What are 5 heads?
I have to so agree with you. And absolutely, I am so happy to hear you express it so beautifully, because I do think a lot of people have a hard time understanding what inclusion really means. And that if you take the time to get to know people that have different opinions than yourself, you expand yourself as a human being instead of staying in a tight little box that maybe you're comfortable in.
Absolutely. You nailed that. And honestly, when we look at even just in the definition, you're right, sort of when you move it away from a limiting word, right, and you create expansion out of the word, what does that mean? It makes you excited about the collection of ideas you can bring together, right? The collection of experiences, the notable things that you didn't think about, that you don't have to think about. That's actually a better way to think about, to think of it, is that there are all these systems, there are all these tools, there are all these opportunities that I don't have to represent, that because of the expansive stage I've created, other people or other things or other ideas are going to represent them. So I'm more than likely going to get so many facets of understanding to whatever it is we're putting it to. So, I think and that's where the participation becomes really cool, because everybody wants to be part of something that's bigger than them, something that expands them, something that enables them longer or wider or deeper. So it's looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah, and as you said, it's something that everybody wants to be a part of, which is why, like, I think that this idea can apply to just so many different, like, I guess, like subjects and everything. Like, even if you're interested in healthcare or education or law, I think you can find a way to apply it in every single scenario.
Absolutely. I mean, Kanchan, think about it. You're a smart girl. Look at what you're doing. As young as you are, you're hosting a show, you're asking good questions, and you're a student. And I'm sure you're a very good student. But just imagine your education being a little bit more participatory, a little bit more experiential, right?
Mhm.
That's what, so take it to that level. So if for some reason you could craft your education, and let's look at it more at the college level, where you take the subjects that are specific to what you need, you bring those in. You take the companies or the sectors you're interested in, and you get the curated pieces or learnings that you need from them, you bring them in. That becomes part of your curriculum. You take some remote access, some remote learning, you bring that in, that becomes part of your curriculum. So you have this experiential aspect of it. You have these ways to make your education robust. So you can add subjects of things that you're curious about. That becomes it. We create this curriculum around you, your interests, your desires, your goals for the future. We're not pigeonholing you. We're not saying this means you're going to do this. What we're saying is that we're creating a foundation that ensures that when you come out of school, you're going to know something about what you want to do. And what you've learned will be enough. And the reason why I'm saying this and why I think it's so important is that today, 53% of graduates are underemployed, which means they're people who are part of the 60% that have student loans up to $1.5 trillion that are employed under what they learned. Because why? What they learned is not relevant to what's needed, right?
Absolutely. That is absolutely a perfect point to make. And the thing that I think about when you talk about inclusion is that everyone needs to come into the conversation or the learning experience with an open mind, because I find that often, and I actually, my master's degree is in African American studies. So when I was into classes, I was met with a lot of resistance because I obviously am not African American, but I had a love and a passion for African American art and artists. And so, it followed into the learning experience of a master's degree. But, there were a lot of people that were very close-minded about that. And I think that is one of the things that we as a whole need to learn, how to interact with people that are different than us, that may have similar interests, and be open-minded about that learning process together, because you have a story, but I also have a story. And when we share those stories, we expand what we're learning.
Absolutely. I love what you just said, because honestly, it's at the core of it. Here you are, people have an expectation of you, but they don't know you. They don't know what contribution you're supposed to make into the future, right? They don't know the people you're supposed to bring together. They don't know the innovations that have your specific expertise attached to it.
Right.
So had you not done what you desired to do, you would not have achieved some of those things that were specific to all the experiences and the learnings you have. And I think that's what, that's what makes it so crucially important. And I think we can look at it in so many sectors. I was just looking, when I was looking at some numbers around, $1.5 trillion of loans. If you looked at that number, you know what Apple's market capitalization is? It's $2.17 trillion, just 500 billion more. A couple of years ago, Apple's market capitalization was less than that. So we have students carrying loans that are about the size of some of the biggest companies in the world. So just, when you kind of think of those burdens, if we could have shared those burdens very differently, some of them could have been entrepreneurs, some of them could have worked,
Absolutely.
and done something else and all that, just by having all these pieces naturally allowed to come
Right.
to their lives. So I think it's such a broad topic. You can look at it in almost any format, right? And in almost any way, right? So Kanchan, what are the things that you have thought about with respect to inclusion?
I think for me, I was thinking about what you were saying about how we could like craft our own education. And I know that there was actually a school in a European country that like every single day the students come there, there's no homework and everything, and they just get to choose what they do all day. They brainstorm a project and then they execute it. And I think that's something that should be implemented into like all classrooms, because I know I've sat through a lot of classes where I have no interest in what they're talking about. It doesn't like, because it doesn't relate to anything I want to do.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's a very valid point, because I do think that there are a lot of student loans out there for people that have gone to college and not known what they're interested in. Maybe they never determine what they're interested in until they're 30, 40, or 50 years old. And they've set this course for themselves that is not realistic because they have no interest in it. And I think so many young people are afraid to go to other types of schools like trade schools or culinary school or whatever it may be, because they feel that 4 years of college is a must. And, so I mean, I'm always one of those proponents that, everyone doesn't have to necessarily go right from the frying pan into the fire, so to speak. They kind of need to have an idea of what they're really interested in.
Yeah.
And that's,
go ahead. Kanchan, go ahead.
Thank you. And that's why I think that high school classes are so limited, in the sense that like they're like Moravian Academy, we don't have like some sort of like home ec class, so we don't get to like experience like culinary stuff, as you said, and like design and everything. Like they have a lot of art courses, but still like not everything is covered. And I think that that's something that should be changed. I think that like high school should cover so many different broad topics so that students can figure out what they're actually interested in, have at least some sort of plan, or at least just some sort of direction that can help them after high school, even if they don't plan on going to college.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. I was actually going to also talk about look how both of you, Sarah and Kanchan, you're different generations and you're working together, right?
Right.
It's that ability to sort of see synergies, right, around people who are completely different. She's a good speaker. You're a good speaker. Your ideas can come together. So it's I think experiential learning is a huge part of all this, is a huge part of inclusion. Is how can we make it such that, and that was what Kanchan was alluding to, such that people can test out who they really are or the things that they enjoy way before they get stuck. It's what Germany did, right, with their community colleges. So most of the engineers I worked with, they had been in labs, they had worked in real companies, so that by the time they went back and did their 4-year degree or finished up and got their engineering degree, they were so hands-on. It was amazing to watch. So people like us, we're still, we had done some stuff in the lab and all that, but they had been lab techs, because you had to, in Germany, most of the engineers, they would go to, almost like a community college, work with a company, go work for that company for a few years, then come back and finish the degree. So they were disciplined about work. They were comfortable in the lab. It was a whole different perspective. You already knew how to work and you understood the importance of work. And if you didn't like what you were doing, you could pivot, right? So it was all that. And as I was just watching two of you, I was like, look at the beautiful synergy, because you're not afraid to engage and say, hey, can we do this thing together? Can we make that chat together, right?
and really that chat came about because Kanchan's mother had reached out to me. We had her join us in another show that we were doing. And she said, hey, I'd really like to do more about this and have more conversation. And so I said, sure. And I contacted Holly and I said, let's think about doing something that's more of a topical, serious program than another show that we do. And that's how it all came about. And it really was just putting the ideas together, and deciding what it is that we can do going forward that would be of interest to people, because not every show can be interesting to everyone. But I think that this topic for me is one that's near and dear to my heart, because I find that a lot of people, we have a lot of things that put us in our little lane, whatever it might be, whether it's your job or your religion or your politics or your race, or there's just so many things that right now I see as a division between so many people. And I have to say that back when I was a younger person, it was not as apparent to me as it has become over the past few years, for whatever reason, that these things, we're going back to these reasons to not associate with this person, or not brainstorm with that person, or maybe not go to this church, or maybe not, and whatever it may be. I hope that we get back to the point where we do have inclusion with all people, with all interests, and learn from each other respectfully. I think that is the thing that I've noticed, is that so much respect is missing right now.
Yeah, and I think some of it is how we allow people participate.
Right.
That's where the definition of inclusion kind of goes to, sort of.
Right. And I think it's a great subject, because a lot of people don't understand what inclusion actually means. It just means opening up and accepting people for who they are and what their views are, and going from there and finding common ground.
Yes.
And I think a lot of that can kind of come from what you learn when you're my age, like in school and everything. I know a lot of classes we don't have a lot of open discussions. So it's really just sitting, raising your hand. So I think that's something that kind of hinders this entire topic. And then once you're older and you want to, it's so difficult to change. So I think that what goes on when you're my age and younger, changes can completely change your beliefs when you're older.
Absolutely.
Right.
Oh, Kanchan, you just nailed it. You nailed it.
You did.
Yeah, because honestly, it starts now. Even, I know Sarah alluded to your politics, your thoughts, your religions, and all that. Imagine the whole idea around best practices. What does that mean? It's what people have sort of finessed, right, and determined to give the best outcomes, right?
Right.
That are repeatable, that we can leverage. But how do we achieve that? Is by harnessing the best out of people. How do you harness the best out of people? Is by giving people the freedom to really participate. Right?
With respect.
Exactly, with respect, right? So going back to what Kanchan was saying, it really starts with them.
Right.
If this generation of young people learn how to be open, how to be accepting, how to listen and tease out important information in a safe space, whether you agree or not is not the question. What you learn to do is that you learn to desire other people's perspective. You learn to desire other people's input. You learn to desire ideas and all that. And once you have that habit practiced, it just makes it such that whenever you're thinking of something, you almost want an antagonist, respect, and someone who sees differently to be part of that mix, so that you're sure that you've gotten this 360 view of what you're trying to do. Because you know that the things that you guys are going to be doing, Kanchan, are big things, the important things. You're going to be looking at the way we're going to be educating next is going to be extremely different, right? Because you need to be asking yourself, right, how do we use technology to educate ourselves in a way that gives us the outcomes that we want? So things like virtual reality, right, where you're trying to simulate the future and say, is this the future we want, or is this the outcome we want of something? Or using machine learning or AI algorithms to ensure that maybe you can speed things up and all that. And I was thinking even biometrics, a lot of times talk about, cheating in exams and all that. But if we can kind of monitor eye movements, right? Or we do facial recognition like we're able to do. We know who is in the class. We know that person is going to. So you guys are going to be taking care of so many big problems. We need you to be able to take care of those problems with the best and the biggest ideas. So what you said was so apt, concerning the need for us to start with you. And I think that's what all of us have to advocate. And that's why I love what is happening here. I love that you're working with Sarah. I love that, you're bringing all kinds of perspectives and things like that. And that's really where it starts. That's really where it starts. So the other part I was going to talk about a little bit is on entrepreneurship, right? Because as we look at inclusion and participation and stuff, that's really the heart of what makes entrepreneurship successful. Because not everyone is going to have a job waiting for them. In fact, I argue that Kanchan's generation, the jobs they're going to be working have not been determined yet.
I agree with that.
We don't know what those jobs are. Yeah, so definitely. They need to invent their jobs, right?
Well, and entrepreneurship is I mean, that I have a very, I'm an entrepreneur. So, for me, that is a very interesting subject, because we have at East Stroudsburg University here in Stroudsburg, we have the Innovation Center, which teaches people how to be entrepreneurs. And I had a conversation with the lady that runs it. And I said, can you teach entrepreneurship? Because that to me is a question. I grew up in a family that my dad was an entrepreneur. My mom was his, she was the lady behind the man. She kind of did all the bookkeeping and all of that. So I grew up in that type of environment. And I said, is it taught, or, do you grow up with it? What is it that makes an entrepreneur? And
what did she say?
She said that she thought everyone can be taught to be an entrepreneur. I don't know. I'm still not 100% in agreement with that, only because there are a lot of things that you have to know about, and not everyone is able to take all of those pieces and turn it into a business that works and makes money. Yeah. I think you can create a business, but you need all of those little extras that not everyone always grasps. So I don't know what your feeling is about that.
Can I tell you my thoughts? So I look at entrepreneurship as sort of a participatory science and art. Okay. What I mean by that is, for me, I look at ecosystems. That's because, and I think part of it is because of how my career kind of built up. And I see the entrepreneur, so it depends on who you define as the entrepreneur. So I actually think both are right. That entrepreneurs are born, but entrepreneurs can also be made. Because when I invest in a company, I see myself as an entrepreneur, right? Because I'm participating in the success, the building, the development of whatever widgets that innovator is bringing to the table. So I see myself as because I'm taking a risk. I'm trusting them. So I'm part of that ecosystem. So I see all the parts of the ecosystem as important to the entrepreneur. So I see them all as entrepreneurs. So from that perspective, I believe that it can be taught. Now, in terms of the innovator, I believe that there are some people who have a bent or a knack for being able to have just this extra ability to push through really difficult and challenging things more than others. And they are the ones that can carry the mantle and sort of take it to the other place where others would have given up or just gone back to their steady jobs or had more routine and all that kind of stuff. So I sort of look at it like that. But what it actually speaks to me is that the best entrepreneurs are those who are inviting, those who recognize that it's not just them, because there is no journey, especially a big journey, that is ever taken successfully alone. It's impossible. I've been an investor on one side, I've been an entrepreneur on one side, and I've seen companies fail. I've seen companies super succeed. And the best companies and the best people were those people who quickly understood, that they were a piece of a puzzle, and that what they needed to do was find the right pieces or the nearly right pieces,
Mhm.
harness the best out of them. So
I
yeah.
I have a friend that is, has a very successful company down in Lehigh Valley, and he said, I don't want to ever assume that I know it all. So I hire the best of the best for all of the parts that need to go together in order for the company to run properly and be successful. And so that absolutely falls in line with what you're saying.
And also when you start looking at, as you look at innovators, you look at Kanchan and the rest of them, I think one of the things that they're doing differently is that they're innovating from all corners. Before when we think of an innovator, we think Google, we think
Mhm.
technology at the heart of it. But innovation is what you're doing. This.
And I
You're
wonder
innovating.
if we started earlier in schools teaching certain skills, if it would change how the entrepreneurial spirit would come out of our young people rather than be maybe quieted as they're growing up, because I think we do take a lot out of them and a lot out of their spirit as we try to fit them into the molds that the schools expect.
Yeah, Kanchan, you're an expert on that. You're in a school where entrepreneurship is something that you guys look at from different perspectives. So what's your opinion as a young person?
I would 100% agree. I think there's so many situations in which I would have rather been trying to come up with ideas and, like even like in any class, just do something like with my own hands and create something rather than just kind of like learn about what other people have done. I definitely think it's important to first look at what other people have done, just so you can like learn from their mistakes, get inspired. But I definitely think that the other half of it is you can learn so much from just doing something. And I think that we
Mhm.
don't do that enough. And that the students that are able to do things by themselves and really just create something in any subject are extremely lucky, because they are getting skills that so many people don't until college or in any way that they can. So I definitely think that right now that is something that you can like it's like a privilege to get, but I think that it's something that everybody should get, because it should just be a requirement in all schools.
I love that. I agree with you. I think honestly, the idea and also the age thing has changed significantly. We're seeing a lot of young people like you guys. You're so innovative. You're not afraid of technology. You're not afraid. You're not afraid. I mean, you're working with Sarah. You're not afraid to speak to anyone. You're respectful.
Right.
You're very confident. So I think you are the classic example of why we have to look at all these things around participation, inclusion, making you part of the decisions we make long term, right? Making you
Mhm.
part of whatever vision that is had in the future. So you're absolutely right. I think every school, and I've been in universities because I do a little bit of light teaching in some colleges, and I'm beginning to see where entrepreneurship is becoming a big thing, is an important thing. And I love when they really look at it from an ecosystem perspective, to what Sarah was saying, where you recognize that, we're all part of this big tapestry. And the more people get involved, the better for everyone, the better the outcomes, right? And that's also why I think technology is such a huge I try not to overplay technology because I sort of come from more of a STEM field, and I look at technology in two parts. There's the deep science where you're looking at biotech, microcomputing, biocomputing, all of
Right.
that. But there's also the applications that is available to all of us, and the fact that anyone can learn so many things. So when you look at it from an application standpoint, we can all leverage that to reach so many more and to do so much more. And I think you guys are going to be such amazing beneficiaries. All of us are such amazing beneficiaries of that. So for
And
me,
I think kids have a very different kind of viewpoint on everything, that I think if there's a situation, I think an adult is going to have a completely different view than a student or a kid. And that's why I think entrepreneurship, like with students and kids, is so important, because we look at things so differently. And our ideas in like the same top like field would be so different from those of an adult or a person who's like extremely experienced in the field, which is why I think when like with inclusion and everything, I think that like kids in the past have been very underestimated. And in the past couple of years, there's been so many, like with Intel, there's all of these projects that you're going through where kids are working with artificial intelligence. They know so much about like the human body and everything. And I think that's like what should be happening, because I think kids are finally being more like respected in like fields kind of.
I like that. I really like that because also,
Me too.
yeah, I love that because in fact, the way she brought it together is it makes inclusion instead of the whole thing around inclusion being this big tapestry. Because when you bring a child in authentically, I'm not sure, not when you're kind of saying they're cute and they're smart, when you bring them authentically because you respect the information they have and you really want to tap into it, that's almost the most vibrant way of demonstrating inclusion because you're allowing yourself suspend your biases to allow somebody who does not have the privilege of your biases, let's just call it a privilege, but doesn't have, the privilege of your biases to come on board and bring something totally different. That's why I was saying I really love what you're saying, because the limitations that we've had, like for me, I've done certain experiments so many times. So I already have a benchmark of what I won't go back to because I feel like I know this stuff. Somebody else comes in and looks at it totally different and wants to start again. But then starting from a different first principles, they're breaking it up in bits in a way I haven't done it. And they come up with a whole new set of ideas that changes everything. I think that's fantastic. I think you're absolutely right. That's the ultimate definition of the way we see inclusion. It's me suspending all my biases and allowing you come in without the privilege, and I say that in quotes, of my biases and bring to bear, the great ideas you have. So I think that's just what makes it really exciting, and I think will make the world so much better in the future. So I'm looking forward to a lot of what you guys are going to be doing. I'm looking forward to these types of relationships. I'm looking forward to so many more conversations around this.
Yeah, because if you went to like a science fair, a local science fair, there are so many ideas that you have seen. Like I've gone to science fairs when I've been participating, and I can't help myself to go and look at other people's projects because it's like just so crazy to think how people came up with these ideas on their own. And at our age, with our like resources, we were able to execute these projects and prove whether or not our hypothesis was true or not. And I just think that's like amazing for, what we have and how some adults can view, children and their ideas.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the other thing too is utility, right? The world we're experiencing now is exciting and is wonderful, but it's also scary. We just went through, COVID. We went through trying to get a vaccine quickly that has now become available. And when you look at why was that vaccine available so quickly? Because they were able to circumvent a lot of the limitations of before. There was all kinds of AI modeling of the behavior of the virus that gave them information that maybe would have taken 2-3 years to do, right? There's a lot of money thrown at it. So manufacturing was so much easier. There was collaboration. So everybody's working on different things. So you see where inclusion really changed the trajectory of the world, right? But at the same time, what that says to us is what's going to happen 2 years from now, 3 years from now. We've seen something really scary, which means many more scary things can happen. Utility comes in. The ability, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we can never look at participation and inclusion like motherhood and apple pie, in the sense that it's a nice thing to have. It's such an important thing to have because we have seen it save lives. And so utility, when you bring in many people, many of them have to think about utility. How does this help us? How does this make a difference? How do we make sure that we've created some models of pattern recognition that identify the next variant on the virus so that 2-3 years from now, if there's a virus, boom, we take care of it. We're not having to shut down and the world doesn't stop and all that. It's because of inclusion. It's because of participation. It's because of utility, because when many people come together, serious minds are going to make sure there's an outcome that means something. So it's just such an important conversation that we should never gloss over it or allow anybody just kind of gloss over it. Everywhere we're going, we should be carrying it as a, almost like our banner to ensure that it's done right.
I
That's
think, as you said, that like with the vaccine, like the entire world came together and we like were able to create something so fast. And I think that it's almost like sad to see that this could only happen in a time of need and panic. And I think the biggest step for everybody moving together is just being able to maintain that all the time, even when there's not a serious situation going on, just figuring out how to maintain this constantly, because we did it when we really needed to and it worked out so well. So it should be something that like stays implemented and continues on.
Oh, absolutely. And the magic of it is what we're talking about, right? Is if you, myself, Sarah, and a whole bunch of us really believe that there is value to each of us individually and collectively, that forces us to behave that way, right?
Mhm.
You almost have to consciously believe that there's value, so that it's not when there's an emergency that you do something. So I'll tell you a story. So when the vaccine came out, right, many countries came together and said that they're going to have one process, one strategy, which said that we're going to vaccinate the most vulnerable, no matter where they are in the world.
Mhm.
So what happened next was countries decided that after that decision was made at the United Nations level, countries decided that, nope, we're going to focus on our countries. We're going to vaccinate, our own people. So people started vaccinating deep. So vaccine availability to some countries all over the world became a problem. So for example, in the US, we have about 50-something% vaccinated. In many countries in Africa, they have about 2% vaccinated. In Asia, same thing. So you have this huge disparity.
Mhm.
What happens? So the G7 meeting happens. President Biden announces that they're going to give 80 million doses to other countries, and then other countries start saying we're going to do the same thing. Why did they do that? Because everybody remembered what happened before and said, whoa, we better make sure we participate with everybody, because we've already learned our lesson with COVID. COVID is not a respecter of persons. So if we don't take care of all these nations and make sure that they're, at least reaching some kind of reasonable level, it could come back and harm all of us. So, to your point, it's so important that it's not just a one-time thing. It's always thinking, it's what does Sarah need? What does Kanchan need? How can Sarah, Kanchan, and Ngozi, how can we come together and create some kind of a collective, resource for all of us to be successful? So I think, like she was saying, it's this constant desire to sort of care for ourselves. It brings us back to the baseline of saying, what is your humanity about?
I think that like that example that you use can also help to like show that like when you include people, it's not gonna hurt you in any way. It's actually gonna benefit you. If you're working on a project and you ask for somebody's ideas, their ideas can't hurt you in any way. It's just gonna help you come up. Either you can use those ideas and integrate them with your own, or it's gonna help you just come up with your own ideas. So it can never really like hurt you in a sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, I don't know, Sarah, if you've had experiences, I don't know if you ever worked in corporations before you became an entrepreneur, but I had a very long experience working in corporate America. Actually, I was really blessed to work for probably at one point what was one of the biggest companies in the world, which was AT&T, Bell Labs, microelectronics, and all that. And then we morphed into other organizations. And one of the things that I learned so fundamentally from there was, building a career, no matter how good you are, if you don't have the support that is required, if you don't have, people, you break them up, sponsors, mentors, network, all kinds of different ways to look at it. But just at the 40,000-foot level is, if you don't have some kind of an enabling community around you, you will suffer. Because when I ended up in government, I joined a group of women. We called ourselves Seven Sisters. And when
I love that.
Yeah, we're still very good friends. When I heard some of their stories, my story was vastly different. I was really lucky. Now, we had very little diversity, but I just happened to be lucky that I had people who cared a lot about me. And so I used that leverage to try and help a lot of, other people come in and stuff like that. But the point is that even though I feel like my career was full of a lot of work, just hard work, because, you kind of had to prove yourself. So you just worked really hard. When I heard their stories and some people's, just the antagonism against them because they didn't have that network around them, you start to see how well they've done and how much more they could have done because of, when you watch something, when you see the excellence that dwells with them, and then you see the challenges that they faced, and you're like, wow, with what this person has done, what could they have done had they had the support that they got, that they needed? It just, for me, that frightens me about, we don't know what Kanchan is going to do, right?
Right.
Our job is to create the enabling environment and push her as far as we can, and the next person catches and pushes and all that kind of stuff. But imagine stifling that. Just from the little you already know, imagine that's scary. That's scary.
And I think it already has happened to so many students who just don't have the resources or the support. I know teacher support can mean a lot, and in a lot of schools, especially public schools, which are really, really big, you don't get that support from your teachers all the time because they're so busy, which at the time kind of seems like a small thing, but I think that relates exactly into what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one thing about Moravian Academy. They do have such an incredible support system for the students. My daughters both went to Moravian and, are both very successful in the paths that they have chosen. But, I think that they were fortunate because they had parental support, they had teacher support, as they went on. They, we have a very extended family. So there was a lot of family support that so many people are lacking. And I would love to know what your thought is about recreating that in some way for people that maybe don't have that type of support system, for the young people that are going forth into the world. Like, how do we create a space for them where they feel that they have, all the things that they really need?
I love that. I love that. And I'm not going to lie, it's a big question, right? Because there's so many things that affected between the economics, where you live, where you go to school, all that. But if you kind of peel all that, off a little bit and sort of get to, what's the brass tack? What's the core thing? I think the core thing is really something that I think you mentioned. You used the word respect. And respect always sometimes sounds like an activity that you do. Honestly, words really matter because words and perspectives matter. Because if you think of respect, sometimes it's like, oh, do you deserve respect? You earn respect. But I think what I got from you saying respect is encapsulated in regard, which means you care for that.
Exactly.
Person. It's not because of what they have or who they have and all that. So if we look at, I think part of the way I look at it, and is to get more specific, is, one time I gave a speech in Pittsburgh and I said to the mayor, because Pittsburgh was doing so well and all that, and they wanted me to acknowledge, and I did acknowledge all of that. But then I said to them, if 30% of your community is not doing well and 70% is doing extremely well, guess what you have? 70%. I said, if my daughter came home with 70%, I said, Mom, yeah, see what I did? I'll say, you did really poorly. I'm sorry. I'm not going to embrace and say, great job. So, and everybody it was like, you could hear a pin drop. We ended up having this amazing conversation. But the point I'm trying to make is regard requires you and I to look at life that way. Is to
That's right.
Look beyond, I'm part of the 70% and we have an A if it was just 70 out of 70. But when I remembered a 70 out of 100, we have like a C. I don't know how Moravian grades. I'm assuming Kanchan, that's not a good grade.
A 70 is like
like a C.
They frown on a 70.
Exactly.
I don't.
Exactly. So if we think like that, what that requires of me is that I have to make time, to be purposeful about supporting someone. So how I do it practically is, for example, we do the Women's History Month event. I make sure that every year we include some very young people, because I want an 11th grader to be able to speak about something that matters to them, that they can put on their resume, right? Regardless of where they are, that is useful, that they spoke to an audience and they were able to get this, because I think that helps students. So that's one of the things that I do. The other thing I try to do is I mentor a lot of young people, because I honestly feel like people just need tools and they need access to someone. So I'll go to schools that have nothing to do with where my children go to, and I'll, mentor a whole bunch of people, or I'll go and do a speech and I give people my number, which always gets me in trouble because all kinds of people start calling me. I'll give them my number, I'll have conversations with them. And sometimes it's not like I'm doing a lot, because I don't really have a lot to give. But the little thing I'll give, a parent will come to me and say, oh my gosh, you changed my son's life, or my daughter really feels this way. Can she talk to you again? Or can you come here? Or can you help her to, look at this essay, or blah, 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 something like that. And then I try to create linkages. Like, I have a son, our youngest child is in 10th grade. I think he's going to 11th grade. I try to make sure that he engages, people from other schools, and he tutors a whole bunch of people. He tries to speak into people's lives, and he also tries to listen to them. Because one of the things I tell my son is, you might see the world this way because that's the ecosystem you're in. It doesn't devalue somebody who sees it this way. So if you don't listen to that person, you're really not as smart as you think you are. Because if you cannot transplant yourself to that situation and be able to learn something and thrive, then you have a limitation. So
Right.
so he's forced to, or now he's comfortable with, listen to other people and learn how they're doing stuff, and approve of that, and see that as legitimate. So I think it's all of us just having regard for what someone else is doing, and then participate. And then the rest of it is really, there's, programs that really.
Well, and I think as parents, we have a responsibility to teach our children from a very, from birth, basically, how to interact with people of all economic,
Yes.
socioeconomic groups.
Yeah.
I know, when my daughter was a little girl, she wanted to go and feed the hungry. That was her desire. And she was 4 years old.
Yeah.
And I called every food bank and I said, my daughter wants to come and help. And they said, oh, we can't have a child here. So instead, anytime we would see someone that was homeless or in need, we would bring food. We would bring food for their dog. We would, and she learned how to help and care for others in her way. And now she's a nurse. She just got her nursing degree.
Fantastic.
But nurturing that inner part of her as a child, I'm sure had something to do with her life choice as she got older. And I think that as a parent, we are so responsible to sit and listen to our children and what their desires are. It may be something that is shocking to you that they, that my daughter wanted to go and help people in the soup line. Did not surprise me, but it was also something that I couldn't help her necessarily do. But we found another way to give her what she needed with that. And I think, I don't know what your feeling is about that, but I feel that, taking our youth, even if it's a child that maybe doesn't have both parents and they're interested in doing something, helping them maybe achieve that if they're a friend of your child's or whatever.
Absolutely. Actually, as you were talking, something just struck me. You went and did your master's in African American studies.
Yes.
That is huge. And I want to spin it.
Okay.
A lot of times what happens is that we've predetermined what are the best things to do. And in predetermining those things and communicating those things, we're also communicating what are the worst things to do. Do you understand? So if I see you doing that, you took something that in some minds might be, what are you doing? Like you're throwing your life away. And I'm getting extreme, right? With that comment. Like, wow, you're wasting your time, because people might not see that as a place that will be lucrative for you or that makes sense for you to participate, but you legitimized it in the eyes of the communities that are yours.
Right.
And you've turned that experience into something rich and beautiful and all that. What you've done is that you've created a door, whether you know it, you probably don't know somebody who might have followed you, but there are people who will follow just because of you. And
Well,
so
actually, because my undergraduate degree was at Lafayette College, and I studied painting and printmaking with a master printmaker there that is African American. And I met so many incredible artists there, but there were students that knew what my next step was. And, you know, there were students of color that would say to me, why would you want to do that? Like, what would that be of interest to you? And I said, because there are stories to be told, and I want to know how to tell them properly, you know, because I think part of the issue that I ran into was that, you know, you are watched more closely because you are not the norm, to make sure that you don't do something politically incorrect that is going to offend. And I think that for me was one of the biggest learning things for me was, you know, knowing how to interact and not offend. It was very important to me. And because there are a lot of people that do not wish to offend, but they don't know how to learn about it, and they don't know how to approach it so that they can have an interaction like we're having without offending someone.
I was just thinking though, that just by you doing that thing, you know, you kind of you took, it's almost like you had a circle. This is your circle. You connected it to another circle. You created this bigger circle.
It's like a chain.
Exactly.
It's a chain.
I don't know who followed you, but someone absolutely followed you. Someone became curious about that ecosystem and could link it to another. And you're creating this bigger understanding. And somehow now someone can create a job and income that is legitimate out of a whole group that they would never have considered before.
And I mean, there was a young man in one of the classes that took offense by a question that I had asked. And I asked it not to offend anyone, but, you know, it was at a time when, you know, African Americans were, you know, the names were changing, you know, how you wanted to be, you know, titled or whatever the word, you know, would be. And I asked, you know, why is it that you feel the necessity to do that? And this young man took huge offense to it and wrote to the professor about how dare I, because here I was, and obviously, you know, Anglo-Saxon white woman, and what, you know, how dare I ask such a question? And the professor said, you know, and I think that's why those words stick in my mind. She has a story, and you should learn her story, just as she is wanting to learn your story. And when you start doing that, you will grow as a person and in your culture, because right now she knows more about your culture than you do. So he said, you need to watch how you ask the question, because I find what you're saying offensive. And I thought that was such a turning point for me, because I had never meant to offend anyone. I really wanted to understand why this particular thing had occurred over, you know, hundreds of years, how you were titled. I guess that's the best way to say it.
And why you want that to change. And that was an opportunity for him to explain maybe the emotional bondage of it, the perceptive bondage. It was just an opportunity to teach, and then for you to learn. So sometimes we miss those, and that's the whole thing around regard. You know, knowing.
That's right.
you almost have to walk in assuming people mean well. And then when they don't mean well, then you respond. But for the most part, to
Right.
respect someone, we have to decide that they mean well. So Kanchan, you're itching to say something. What do you want to say? I can see you.
I was gonna say, I think the biggest thing that you said that struck out to me was how there's so many people who want to be able to have conversations and they just don't know how to without being offensive, and they don't mean to be at all. And I again think that everything is from the perspective of a student and a person who's still in school. That's something that I think could have benefited so many of us, learning that in a young age, elementary school, middle school, like high school, just including that throughout all of our years of school, because I think that could have helped our education so many ways and kind of made our understanding of certain topics so much broader. And I think that doing that also could have led to like avoiding so much exclusion that happens with just kids in general, because everybody knows that there's always some sort of like problems that happen between kids. And I think that being able to have a conversation, like learning how to have a conversation and approaching it in a way that you know that you're not going to say anything that's offensive, because that's not what you're trying to do. I think that
Right.
can change so many different outcomes of just like different like friendships,
Well,
education.
And that's where the regard comes in, because I think that one of the things that I really learned is that when you approach a subject with regard, and with, really an honest heart about the question or the conversation, no one can take offense. And I mean, I've had many difficult conversations over my years in radio. We've talked about all different subjects. And of course, my background in African American studies has helped with a lot of the conversations that I've had. But not everyone is willing to like take the lumps, so to speak, that you earn as you go along to learn about other cultures. Because to me, like, your culture is fascinating. You have a dance recital coming up that is a fascinating subject. And it's a rare glimpse of your culture for people that, like myself, that are not born in your culture. And I think that it is something that schools should really offer. I mean, it's something that has been near and dear to my heart. I've talked to, the other ladies that are involved in the show, where I would love to start a girls' club in the schools to help people learn what sistership is all about. How we interact with each other.
No,
because
using like dance as an example, because the type of dance I do is very like, it's not what people are used to hearing when you say that you're a dancer. Normally they expect like ballet, tap, jazz, things like that. And so unfortunately I can say that like when so many people ask what type of dance I do, I'll always just say classical. I don't really clarify that it's like Indian classical and what it is, because I know so many people are going to just react in such a negative way that it's like, because they don't really know, like they don't know anything about it and they don't know how to approach something
the conversation.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. The conversation about it. And like, I think that they're just afraid of sounding as if they're not going to know like what they're, because they don't know anything about it. So like, even myself now, I've kind of like stopped always like completely sharing if I know I'm talking to a person who might react that way.
Right.
Wow, that's interesting. Wow, that is,
and that's sad to me, because what you could bring to that table and educate the people that are asking is huge, because then they may be interested in that. I mean, it's like I love Indian classical dance. I have been to other recitals of my daughter's friends as they were growing up, and I know it is a very big and important thing for you. It's almost like a graduation party. Yeah. So it's a tremendous accomplishment on your part, and I think it's something that your school should be embracing, maybe showing that, during your assemblies that you have that, because it is so incredible and should be shared.
Yeah, because like I've given performances at like I did one during like chapel once, and like when you look out in middle school, when you look out and you're seeing all these kids there, it's not always the most pleasant facial expressions that they have while you're dancing. It's because like, you're doing different types of movements, facial expressions, and they're so not used to it that even if they're curious, sometimes it just kind of comes out as if they think it's weird when they really don't, because a lot of us just don't know how to approach it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's interesting, but I would just say that I think that's part of the process, and I think we just have to, we have to keep adding to that process, because you chip away at those things by just continuing to show it, continuing to participate. So I think you doing your recital is a good way to continue to participate. And people, yeah, you're right. I think a lot of times when we're not used to something, we don't know how to respond. So we just kind of respond in the most coy of ways, so that nobody can really read what we're, even if we're enjoying it, we want to be careful not to enjoy it too much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I just, but on another note, one of the things I was just, as both of you were talking, I was thinking that there are a couple of things that really make life full, right? And one of those things is sort of the richness of the community that you have, right? And just like you were talking about, both of you were talking about how we have to start it really young. And if parents, if all of us, especially those of us who are adults, can really help facilitate community, we would have done so much in one activity. And community means having the people who occupy our spaces, not just our small enclaves, but our spaces, become somehow relevant, active members of our lives. And then the second thing that I was thinking about too, as you were talking, was for schools, this whole idea, I know some schools practices some of those, of a Harkness table. You don't have to call it a Harkness table, but the idea that, in class, you can have conversations, right? You're studying biology, and part of that class is a discussion, like a round table. There's something about seeing eyeball to eyeball, right? It's a round table. You're not sitting where somebody's behind you. You don't know what they're doing behind you. They're sitting eyeball to eyeball. You're disagreeing, you're agreeing, you're conversing until you come to some kind of a consensus where conversation. I think schools need to practice a little bit more of that, where I know schedules are hard because, they also have to get through some curriculum, but I'm hoping that with all these innovations that are coming up, more engagements, more deliberate engagements will happen in classroom. Because my oldest son, the school he went to, they did a lot of Harkness tables where they would even math, they would have round tables to discuss it. And I realized that he started making like deep friendships, very deep friendships, because they conversed about that thing, they argued about that thing, and it came to a consensus, but when they were looking at each other. So those relationships really formed solidly. So I'm hoping that these are some of the things that we'll see in the future. And Kanchan, you're there to champion it, so we'll be behind you.
And that happens to be a fabulous place to end our evening tonight. I can't believe it, ladies, but it's been an hour. We've had a wonderful night tonight with Kanchan Gupta as our wonderful co-host this evening, along with our regular host, Sarah Smith-Katz. And we want to thank Ngozi Bell for joining us for such a wonderful show this evening. It sounds like you guys could talk for like 2 or 3 more shows here. So
I think so.
So I think it was a really great topic. Everybody really enjoyed it. We had some questions in our chat room, and I was happily chatting along with them. If I think we need to have you guys back on. So we need to thank our sponsor, My Girl Managed Services. If you need help with your website, social media, or your Google presence, make sure to check out Jen Narkovich and her team at My Girl Managed Services. They bring us to you every week. Without them, we couldn't do this and have all this fun and have these great conversations. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you soon.